All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Dr. Judy's Lunch Bunch. I am so pleased to be back here with you all today. My name is Sarah Chandler. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat, and Dr. Judy will do her best to get to them at the end of her presentation.
All right.
Welcome.
And Sarah, are you going to come back to open the floor, or should I just open the floor to questions at the end?
I will come back and open the floor.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Well, welcome everybody. It's so good to see you all. Let me tell you a little bit about what next month's presentation is going to be about, so you know what to look forward to. Some healthy alternatives to New Year's resolutions. Research suggests about 80% of New Year's resolutions fail. I don't think any of us are surprised by that because it probably happens to us too. And it's probably because our expectations are too high or they're rooted in excessive self-criticism and self-loathing, like I should do this, not I want to do this. They lack an understanding too of just how difficult it is to really sustain motivation. So I gave a talk quite a couple of months ago on how to be successful with big goals by taking very small steps. So I'm going to incorporate a lot of that so that we can really talk about ways in which you can set goals that are reachable in the New Year's and have an opportunity to experience some success with reaching those goals, which always success breeds success, which is why you don't want to do things that don't work out, like the New Year's resolutions that generally don't work. Must be allergy, excuse me. You want to set goals that are attainable so you feel good about yourself and you get them done. Because when you don't feel good about yourself, you usually don't get much done, and that's the reality. So let me see. I see we have a nice group of people here. I want to say Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Blessed Solstice. You know, whatever you celebrate at this time of the year. The reality is those holidays are usually a mixed bag. There's good in it, and there's also a lot of challenges. And part of the reason it's important to talk about this is because there is a way to sort of minimize the challenges so that you can enjoy at least some of the good aspects of being together with other people and celebrating the holidays. Now, obviously, all of this is exacerbated if you're also grieving during the holidays. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's challenging about the holidays for everybody. But then on top of that, I'm going to talk about how grieving makes those challenges even greater. Because understanding what you're going through, having compassion for yourself as you go through it, are the best ways to then move forward to plan for those challenges and increase the likelihood that you'll deal with them in a way that's helpful to you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how the holidays are stressful. Let's start there. I want you, as you listen to this list, notice what seems true for you and begin to think about what you think is the most difficult part of the holidays for you. You know, because I think it'll be important for you to make this personal. Some things you'll relate to, some you won't. So listen to what I'm saying and see what seems true for you. This is some general ideas about what's difficult about the holidays. And if you didn't get the handout and you want to get the handout, or you want to make sure that you're on our mailing list, put your you can put your email address in the chat room, or Sarah, I think, will also put up our email addresses. We can send the handout to you as an attachment. So what makes the holidays difficult in general? There's too much to do in too little time. I mean, I'm already thinking about the whole list of things I want to get done, starting, after this presentation, because that's a big thing to have checked off. And now I got to get going on the wrapping the presents and buying the presents and figuring out where we're going to get a tree and all that kind of stuff. So, there's just so much to do in such a limited amount of time. I don't know about you, but I feel like I sneezed after Thanksgiving and we're almost at Christmas. There's also this pressure to please with that perfect gift or that perfect meal, which also heightens our stress, this expectation of perfection. And especially if you're doing it in front of others. So if you're cooking the meal for your family, you want to make sure you're doing the perfect meal, and mom or dad don't have something to pick on. Although, even though my father still is gone, I can still imagine what he would pick on in terms of my less than perfect performance. I've worked a long time to not let that get me quite so much, but I think it's pretty common that situations like this bring out our desire to please people and our tendency to be too perfectionistic about it. I'm going to read something that the Mayo Clinic posted on their webpage. The holiday season often brings unwelcome guests, stress, and depression, and it's no wonder. The holidays present a dizzying array of demands: parties, shopping, baking, cleaning, and entertaining, to name just a few. I don't know about you, but I have anxiety just hearing that list. I think the other thing that I find challenging about the holidays is it's hard to reconcile the nostalgia and the sentimentalism that's associated with the holidays with the actual reality, which is often much more stressful, and for many of us involves disappointments. I think of this because my sister will always say to me, "Do you feel it yet? Do you feel it yet?" And she means, do I feel that excitement that we felt when we were kids, that Christmas excitement? And I think it's a lot harder as an adult to have that because you're doing a lot more of the work now to make the holidays happen. But I think we still long for that. So I think there's this disconnect between sort of longing for that feeling that we had as a child and hoping we can still feel it again, and then the reality of having to make holidays happen in real time in the real world. So I think sometimes that creates a little bit of stress for people, just the disappointment because you're not quite going to tap into that initial kind of innocence we had as kids. On top of that, the holidays can be difficult because of unresolved family issues, and which will only be heightened by the holidays. We often think that in a time like this, people will rise above their petty concerns, and we say that too about when people are dying. You think people will rise above and be their best self. It's not necessarily the case. It can also bring out the worst in people, unfortunately, because stress does that. Because we're all human. We're all human. So, most of us did not grow up in perfect families. I know I didn't grow up in a Ozzie and Harriet kind of family. Certainly grew up watching those TV shows and wondering why I didn't have that kind of a family. But the reality is, and I think most of us know it because of shows like Oprah and more candor in our world, that we didn't grow up in perfect families. And so a lot of times the holidays are associated with like alcohol abuse. If you had a father who's an alcoholic, he generally drank more on the holidays. Long-standing kind of sibling conflicts, who got the bigger present, who's mom's favorite, that kind of stuff. um, Jealousy, competitiveness, or judgments by being judged by other people. So those things get stirred up during the holidays, and they're part of that family dynamic that's pretty common for most of us. So Christmas may be tainted by memories of dad being drunk. I had one person tell me that her father said, "But I always showed up," and she said, "Yeah, we opened the door and you fell in, passed out from being drunk." So he showed up, and that's what he said to her, and that was her memory. Hanukkah may be colored by reminders that your brother was the golden child, that he could do no wrong, and you could do no right. So all those things tend to get stirred up again over the holidays. Now, with the pandemic we're sort of returning to normal, but then we've got this new variant, so we're really not back to normal, but we may have a little less family contact or family get-togethers. But we're still going to be reminded if there are connections in our families that are broken or problematic. For example, parents may have adult children who have cut them off or distanced themselves. I do deal with this quite a bit. A lot of people, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why their kids distance themselves from them. Sometimes there's been a bitter divorce in the family, and
302
and oops,
399
okay,
296.
all right. I think somebody's got their speaker on. It should be probably muted. Okay. Hi, everybody. I just want to take a little look and see who's out there. All right, let me get back to my talk. Um, this is real life. Believe me, it's if the delivery man comes while I'm doing this presentation, my dog will take off barking. I think she thinks this is her holiday trauma. I think she thinks everybody from the UPS delivering packages from Amazon is a serial killer, and she will respond accordingly. But again, we have parents who are separated from their kids because their kids have cut them off, and this is a very painful time to be reminded of that, especially with the reasons are not always known. But the experiences I've seen is there's divorces, and sometimes the father or the parent whose love they couldn't win, all of a sudden the kids want that opportunity to win their love. And even though they're grown adults, that's still a dynamic that plays out. There are also parents who had to separate themselves from their kids because they have substance abuse issues or untreated mental health issues. So when those kind of relationships are ruptured during the holidays, it just comes into sharper focus. Everybody thinks, they see other people welcoming their adult children or their grandchildren to their homes for the holidays, and they're, heartbroken over the fact that they don't have that situation happening for them. Sometimes adult children have to separate themselves from their parents because their parents might have been abusive, or they have major psychological or addiction issues that they don't want to be subjected to. Add to that divorce and blended families, and you're dealing with a host of complications about how to split up the time and who gets Christmas, who gets Christmas Eve, all of that. So those are just additional family dynamics that put stress on people during the holidays. There was a study of about 1,300 people, and about 75% of those people reported that they had at least one family member who got on their nerves. And I think most of us can relate to that, whether it's the aunt who says, "Oh, you're putting on a little weight," or the I used to always have uncles that are saying, "Oh, so you're still going to school?" Because of course, when you go on for a doctorate in your school for a long time, and I used to say, he said, "When are you going to get a 9 to 5 job?" And I used to say, "You mean when I only have to work from 9 to 5 and I have weekends off and nights off? I can't wait." You know, but again, there are those little family slights and judgments that you get subjected to. Um, so let's talk then about why the holidays are particularly difficult if you've been grieving on top of those things that we just talked about. And again, see what rings true for you. The holidays are filled with traditions and reminiscing and gathering together with the same people year after year. So when you've lost someone, those memories are painful. The person's absence becomes a presence, a deeply felt void. You've always celebrated this holiday with them by your side, or it was your dad and he always cooked and carved the turkey. I mean, when you're gathering together for traditions that have gone on for years and years and years, you're going to really notice when somebody is missing from those traditions. So, now those memories can become painful. And it's hard not to notice the hole that's not filled by the person who's left us now. Even if your loss was a number of years ago, the holidays are likely to stir up renewed grief because, again, you're so reminded of how many Christmases or Hanukkahs you spent with this person, and now they're not here. So even if the grief is the death happened some time ago, don't be surprised if it gets stirred up again during the holidays. I always hear that song, "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas," and something there's a line, "We will all be together if the fates allow." And I always find myself in the car saying, "Yeah, but the fates don't allow." There are people that the fates didn't allow who aren't here now. So the holidays are going to can bring up grief and loss, even if the death was some time ago. Part of what's hard about the holidays when you're grieving is if you're feeling sad and sort of focused on yourself, you feel sort of out of sync with the holiday mindset of being happy and joyful and giving to other people. If you're grieving, it really is okay to focus on yourself. To heal, you need to focus on yourself at this time. That's not selfish. That's self care. That's being self responsible. You matter. And if you're in the middle of a grief process when the holidays arrive, you have to focus on yourself and take care of yourself. You won't have to do this probably every year, but if it's a pretty fresh loss, it's important to keep the focus on yourself and to make yourself a priority as you go through the healing process because that's important. That's the only way to get through the process is to not try to just numb out the feelings or minimize them or tell yourself to snap out of it. That's not really what helps us heal. Allowing ourselves to genuinely feel what we feel and finding safe ways to get those emotions out, that keeps us more real and more present in the moment. So you might feel out of sync with other people, but I really want you to know that you have to be true to yourself, and that's only natural to feel out of sync with other people right now. If your family wants you to be over it, that can be really hard because you feel kind of misunderstood by your family. You know, you too might wish you were over it, but you're not. And so you can't pretend that you are. But it makes you sometimes feel kind of alienated from people who may not understand that you're not over it and it's going to take some time. You might be afraid they're going to bring other people down because you're not in the same emotional place they are. Um, you may find chit chat challenging. Chit chat is challenging for many people, especially if you're not an extrovert. But when you're grieving, it feels particularly difficult to make that kind of common, sort of surface level talk. Um, I found that, when people are grieving, the kind of things people chit chat about just seem so sort of empty and meaningless to them. I remember somebody talking about she had lost her husband and she was with her adult children, and some of them were like a bit, bickering with their partners. And she just wanted to say, "Stop. You don't know how lucky you are that you still have each other. Don't waste your time with these silly arguments." But, they're still living in a world where the thought of losing their partner doesn't feel real to them. So it just can feel very hard to make light sort of superficial talk when everything feels very different and what's really important has been sort of again brought into sharper focus for you because you are grieving. So chit chat is exhausting and it also feels superficial and it feels hard to do when you're in such a sad place and very tiring. And again, chit chat is challenging anyone who isn't grieving if they just find it hard to be extroverted like that. It's really not their modus operandi. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Also, you may feel sad when others are feeling happy. So that makes you feel out of sync with other people. In reality, millions of people are grieving every single year since about 3 million people die annually. That number's gone up since COVID. It used to be about 2 million annually. Now we're up to about 3 million annually. Um, so again, your sadness may feel out of place, may make you feel left out. So that's why it's important to talk with your loved ones in advance. We're going to talk about the importance of planning as a way to cope with some of this. Then, if you are able to have moments of fun and pleasure, you might experience a backlash of guilt. It's important to realize that it's not a betrayal of your loved one to have a good time. They would want you to enjoy those moments of happiness. So you're darned if you do and darned if you don't, because you're feeling sad and that makes you feel out of sync with other people. But if you're feeling happy, you might feel some internal kind of guilt, no matter how irrational, that you're having a moment of happiness in the time when there's been a loss of somebody who matters to you. Again, I'm sure if you think about it, you know that your loved one, whoever is crossed over, would want you to be happy. But we still sometimes have that knee-jerk response if the happiness kind of sneaks in. Holiday music abounds, and music stirs strong feelings and they trigger memories. The fascinating documentary called Alive Inside, which focuses on using music for people who have dementia, and they really find that music can bring back people's memories even when they seem very distant because of their dementia. And partly it's because the parietal lobe, which is a part of the brain associated with music and other kind of creative acts like painting and art and things like that. That's a part of the brain that's the last part affected by Alzheimer's and I think other dementias. And the other thing that they say in this documentary is that memories are very linked to feelings. So you have a song that was the song that you fell in love with, or, we link music to specific times in our lives, particularly experiences, and they're usually imbued with a lot of meaning. So when we hear music, in a good way, it brings up feelings. For people who are in nursing homes, this guy Bill Thomas, who's in the documentary Alive Inside, says, in nursing homes we have all kinds of ways to deaden people, but we don't know how to enliven them. But this program of music, and they train people to download music for the appropriate era for when that person was born, download music onto MP3 players or iPods or I don't know all that. But and when the people listen to the music, they show this one man, he's all hunched over, he doesn't know who his daughter is. He puts on the music, he picks up his head, he's snapping his fingers, and they're saying, "Who is that?" "That's Cab Calloway. That's my number one man." They take the headphones off and say, "What do you like about the music?" "It's the love. You feel all the love when you listen to music." This is a man who 30 seconds earlier, maybe 3 or 4 minutes earlier, couldn't even recognize his daughter. So music is a very powerful way to tap into memories, so much so that they can use it with people with dementia and bring them back to life in some ways. Check out the video. It's on Netflix. If you have Netflix, type in Alive Inside. Fascinating. But that also means that music is a very strong trigger when we don't want it to be a trigger. So you're walking through the store and they're playing the Christmas music and there's, that one particular song that your father would sing or that just is associated with, someone that you've lost in your life. And it brings up a lot of feelings. Also, the focus on religious activities can be difficult if you're sort of in a stage where you're kind of angry or feeling kind of abandoned by God, which sometimes happens after somebody loses someone they love, especially if it was tragic. So it can be hard to go along with some of the religious activities just because they're not speaking to you in the same way they might have in the past. We'll talk about ways to deal with that, but I think a lot of it's just about accepting that that's where you are right now and not try to force, a premature resolution of that. It has to come from an authentic place and often does over time. But again, if you feel kind of angry or abandoned by God, you may not want to be hearing people talk about God. So firsts are difficult because you dread them beforehand. So here comes your first Christmas, you're dreading it. You find them difficult to get through sometimes. And then once they're over, however, they represent sort of a significant marker on the calendar. And they bring that absence even of a loved one into a sharper focus. So it's like, wow, that was my first Christmas without my father. I think it was 2 years ago, my dad died that first Christmas without him. And actually, he died shortly after Christmas, but he was in the hospital on Christmas Day. And it was the first time in my entire life of 67 years, it would have been then, of not having my father there for Christmas. So, you get through it, you're glad you got through it, but then all of a sudden you realize, so that was my first Christmas without my partner, my father. And that's also very painful and makes the grief so real. because you realize that all the Christmas is moving forward or Hanukkah's moving forward, he or she won't be there either. So that makes it hard. Alcohol is around in greater abundance during the holidays, and it might be very tempting to reduce your anxiety or your pain by drinking. But alcohol is a depressant, so it will only, in the end, make you more depressed. The other thing that makes the holidays difficult when you're grieving is you're already experiencing depths of exhaustion. When people are grieving, they're much more tired than they usually are. And it has a lot to do with the fact that the psyche is processing so much internally. You may not even always be conscious of it, but it's draining. And just to get through your day is challenging. So then you throw in the holidays, and what little bit of energy you have is going to be drained away completely in order to try to fulfill some of those obligations, so that when you're already, your reserve is low in terms of your energy, to throw in the holidays, which demand more of your time and attention, takes what little energy you had away from you. The other thing holidays are difficult is because many people in your life will want you to be your old self. Now, I'm going to say this, and I know that people react to this. That this is problematic because the truth is, if you've lost somebody who really, really matters to you, the resolution, and I don't mean the end of your grief, because it's not like it ever goes away and you cross the finish line, but coming to terms with that loss requires sort of the development of a new self. So you may never quite be your old self. Now, I've had people react to that and tell me that really scared them. Now, I want to say that meaning that you're going to have sort of a new self doesn't mean you're going to lose huge parts of who you are. You're just going to have to incorporate the fact that if you had been part of a couple, now you're single. If you had both parents alive, now you have to accept that you're beginning to go through life without your parents. So it's just incorporating this change, and I think it's people don't want to hear it because they don't want to sort of accept that a door has closed. I don't mean you don't have access to your loved ones and they live within you and you can pray to them and talk to them, but I mean life will be different for you, and it will modify your sense of self. Um, and hopefully, if you take time and you let it happen naturally and organically, it doesn't have to be a terrible new self. It could be a new self that has a greater appreciation for the people that they love and makes time for the people they love more than maybe they did before they lost somebody so significant. So it's problematic if everybody wants you to be your old self when that's not really where you're at. So those are just some of the reasons why the holidays are challenging. If you're grieving or not grieving, they're very challenging. So, if you find the holidays challenging or have in the past, you are not alone and you're not crazy. And there are really a lot of reasons why the holidays are so challenging. And I want you to think about the ones that resonate for you. Also, I'm going to now talk about some suggestions for coping with the holidays. And again, I want you to think what could work for you? How can you minimize the difficulties you might face so that you can maximize your ability to enjoy the stuff that's good? And what works for any one individual is often different from others. So, listen to these suggestions with an ear toward what sounds like something you could do that could work for you. At the end of the handout, you will see I've listed a number of these questions so that, after we're done with this, and we'll have time to go through it online, but I want you to go through it because it gives you a guideline for thinking about what's going to be difficult and how you can deal with that, as well as do other things during the holidays to take care of yourself. Suggestions for the holidays: avoid emotionally charged topics. In the past few years, that's been politics or long-standing family problems. If you decide you do want to try to talk about politics and bridge some divides in your family, I give you a few general pointers. First of all, listen and not just try to make your point. Really make a point of listening to the other person, what they're saying. Convey your feelings with stories. It turns out that stories generally are more impactful than statistics. If you talk about how the current political climate is affecting you personally, the person who's sitting across from you, who knows you, is much more apt to listen to that than statistics. So, try to convey what you're feeling with stories and try to understand and respond to the feelings that are underneath the other person's position, because a lot of times people will be spouting something very strongly, but if you really listen, what you're really hearing is that they're afraid. They're afraid the world's changing in ways that they won't be able to adapt to, or where they won't have significance. And so I think sometimes if you get to the feelings underneath what the person is saying, you have a greater likelihood of forming a connection with one another. You may still disagree on political and policy issues, but you might not necessarily be as you'll remember that they're human and they're going to remember that you're human, and you're going to remember that you share that. And that in and of itself builds a bond. You might just have to agree to disagree if things get escalated. And remember, politicians are going to come and go, but your family is forever. And I think there has never been a greater time in this country when some of those challenges are really high, when the differences between people politically are feel so adamant about them that they really can get in the way of remembering that you care about one another. So I wouldn't necessarily suggest you take this on at the holidays, but there are some people that want to, and so those are just some general ideas for how to keep it on a human level and not lose sight of your shared humanity. I always say to people, think about 3 or 4 positive things that you either did this year or experienced or learned. Take some time to really think about some of the things that happened this year that had an impact on you. Positive things, and sometimes positive things come out of hard things. I have a client who talks about her lucky break. What she means by that is that at some point she was snowboarding, or no, she was sledding down a hill, and she broke her arm, and she ended up having to go to the hospital and have it x-rayed. Well, the person who x-rayed her arm later became her husband. So, sometimes out of bad comes good. But think about the positive things that happened for you this year, even if there were brief moments of joy. We don't all have extended moments of joy, but we might have moments when it's just like we saw a beautiful sunrise. The sky was an amazing shade of pinks and oranges. Think of moments of awe or things that you experienced that were meaningful to you this year, things that you may have learned, maybe even some good books or movies that you saw. So think of a few positive things that you can share with people when you're together with them and try to elicit those things from other people. Ask people to share their positive experiences. Someone told me recently that what they did at I think it was at Thanksgiving, was they didn't want to focus on the negativity. So they did literally go around the table and they said, tell us about one moment of joy that you had in the past year, instead of focusing on. And there has to be room for the negative stuff. You have to have people you can talk to that about. But she said she really wanted to hear about people's moments of joy. And they were very simple things. I think it was a man who stood at the window of his house and he saw his kids come up on the bus and get off the bus, and he just realized that he was so happy to be at this point in his life with a partner and children. So it can be little things, but think about some positive things that have happened and ask other people to reflect on those and share them with you as well. Also, remember that if you're dealing with somebody who's a difficult person, the chances of them changing are really, really low, even if they really, really, really should change, right? So here's the reality. I mean, there are people that are in your life that are a pain in the butt, and you really should change. The way they treat people is terrible. Here's the reality. The likelihood that that person's going to change is pretty low, because the truth is you only have control over one person, and that's you. So you can choose not to react, which isn't the same as condoning or approving with their behavior. You're just choosing not to react so that you choose not to escalate the situation and be a part of it. You can choose to walk away. You can choose to limit the amount of time you spend with somebody who's difficult, and you really can leave if necessary. So again, you don't have control over anybody but yourself. And even if some of the other people or someone else in your life really needs to change, you're better off focusing on what you can do differently. Because I'm sure you've already tried to get them to change in many ways, and it's not likely they're going to. That if it's your partner or somebody that you really need to challenge, you really need to work on this. Well, then you do have to have that kind of conversation. But my experience is that it's hard to change other people. So the person you have control over is yourself. So, arrange ahead of time. If you know there's this one person who's going to approach you at the family party and chew your ear off, or, try to corner you and get into an argument with you, get somebody else involved. Let somebody else know, like your cousin or somebody else, to come run interference. If they see you over there in the corner stuck with that person they know you don't want to be talking to, ask them to come over and say, so and so wants to talk to you in the kitchen. Or the one I always used was, I really have to go to the bathroom, because it buys you time. It gets you out of a situation when you sometimes can't find any other way out. Also good to have somebody who's a reality check. Often when I would be, around my family, I'd start to think that I had no redeeming qualities. That's not entirely true, but my father's ability to be critical could reduce me to about that small, is probably true for most people. So I'd always have some people that gave me a reality check. So, I'd call a friend and say, tell me that I have at least a few good qualities. Um, or my partner if they were there at the event. So defend yourself. Find people who can run interference or give you a reality check if you think somebody negative is going to have an impact on you. Set a budget for how much money you spend on the holidays and keep it simple. Pick perhaps one gift that you can give everybody. Could be a gift certificate. It could be an inspirational book. Maybe you read a really good book this year you want to share with other people. It can be just a nice soap or a body lotion. I think sometimes, you can't take a vacation every day, but if you wake up in the morning and you have a really nice soap to shower with, it's a mini vacation. I buy myself a nice bowl for my breakfast because I can't go on vacation every day, but I can have a mini vacation. So, sometimes just making something simple a little bit sweeter is a really good way to take care of yourself. I think of things like a cool letter opener. Everybody needs letter openers for all that mail we get. I sometimes ask and have given a list of my favorite books or movies and then a gift card to Amazon or your local bookstore so that the person you've given it to can, go get some of those books. And just I love to hear what people are reading because it's better information than something I can find on the internet half the time. Gift certificates that encourage activity. It turns out that the money that is spent on activity is much more rewarding than this money that is spent on things. Somebody did a study on this. So money that encourages, gifts that encourage activity are really good. So even if it's gift certificates to go out to eat, go to the movies, visit a museum, tickets to a park that has, some kind of natural wonder. So gifts that encourage activity can be particularly good gifts to give to people. But again, the idea is if you're stretched thin, and you're trying to simplify your holidays, maybe you pick this one thing that you kind of give everybody. You can also outsource activities. What do I mean by that? If you don't have time to wrap the presents or decorate, is there a teenager in your neighborhood or your family or someone else in your family or the neighborhood who would enjoy earning some cash that could help you with some of that? Because there's an awful lot to do. So if you can outsource some of it, there is nothing wrong with that. And if you're grieving, it's a particularly good time to consider that. And it's also a particularly good time to say, I'm not going to do it this year. I'm not going to decorate. And that's really okay. When you find your body tensing up, your thoughts are racing, or you're realizing some emotions are rising to the surface and it's just not a good or safe time to express them, the one thing you can always do, and it's so simple, is just to consciously slow down your breathing. So much of meditation hinges on one thing: slowing down your breath. Now, you might say a mantra, if that gives your conscious mind something to think about, because you're one of these people that my mind is always racing, so that can be helpful. And it's just sometimes I'll just imagine I breathe in love and I breathe out worry. I breathe in love and I breathe out worry. So, slowing down your breath, part of the reason that works so much is it sends a message to your body and your brain that you really are okay. You're safe. You can slow down your breathing, and as soon as you do that, it relaxes much of the other parts of the body. So it's very simple. You can do it anywhere. You can do it anytime. You don't have to be, announcing to everybody there that I'm breathing in love and breathing out worry. But just slow down your breathing. Consciously slow down your breathing. That alone will send a signal to your body that it's okay, and the tension will go down. Um, Try to resist comparing yourself to others. That's always brought out, I think, by the holidays. If your family wasn't perfect and you're estranged from your children, and again, you see your neighbors greeting their adult children or their grandchildren, you might think that the rest of the world's having this hallmark moment, and that they would judge you if they knew, what was going on in your family. And I'm going to tell you right now, the chances are they aren't having, even if it looks like a hallmark moment, it's probably more complicated than that. And there's far more many people that are, not having a perfect hallmark moment. And even if those that are probably would not judge you the way you might think they would judge you, they'd probably have compassion. So try not to compare yourself to others, because a lot of times it's an illusion that everybody else is having such a great time. As much as possible, practice really good self-care during the holidays. So that means getting a good night's sleep, a full night's sleep. And I'm prone to not doing that. And so we're gonna have company. Susan's family is coming from Maine and Albany, and I'm really gonna make it a choice to go to bed early because I really want to be rested. Take a nice hot shower or a hot bath, drink some herbal tea, ask your partner to scratch your back or massage your hands, something simple. They might have time, not have time to give you a full body massage, so get a little lotion that can massage your hands, scratch your back. That's one of the easiest things anybody can do for you, and it is pure bliss. And a back scratcher is nice, but there's something about that human contact that is heavenly, and they can do it for 3 to 4 minutes, and they can do it while you got a house full of people, and it could really be very relaxing and help you to feel good about yourself. Speak to yourself with kindness. The worst thing we do is we run that tape that's always being critical of us in our heads all day long, and especially during events when we're surrounded by the people who we love and who love us, but we have complicated relationships with. And so try to pay attention to what you're saying to yourself. And across the board, if you can't talk to yourself with kindness, then imagine that you are talking to a friend and what they would say to you, because I'm sure they would be much kinder than you are to yourself. So pay attention to the messages that you are running in the back of your head. And if all else fails, ask yourself, what would Judy say? That's what my clients sometimes say. And I'm telling you, I would say, don't be so hard on yourself. You're human. We all are. You're doing the best you can here. So be nice to yourself and pay attention to that tape you're playing. Drink lots of extra water, eat healthy. I always say, though, don't expect yourself to go on a diet during Christmas. I'm sorry, there's just too many good things to eat during the holidays. So don't shit on yourself if you're eating cookies, but try to eat a little salad here and there and try to eat some of the other thing that's healthier for you. And more to the point, try to enjoy every bite you take, because I think the worst thing I can do is during the holidays just, eat and not even be conscious of it and not even enjoy what I'm eating. So go ahead. If you want to have that Christmas cookie, have it, but be mindful. Eat it mindfully. Just try to pay attention to how good it is. So that at least if you're eating more calories, you're going to enjoy every one of them. That's what I would say. Be mindful in general. You really can only do one thing at a time. All the research shows, and I always, don't want to believe this, but the research shows that when you try to do more than one task at a time, because I always think I'm doing 5 things at a time and I'm doing them all well. Well, guess what? Research shows I'm not. So be fully in the moment. So if you're wrapping presents, instead of running a list through your head of like, and after I do this, I have to do that and that, and that, instead of doing that, try to just be fully in that moment when you're wrapping that present or hanging balls on the Christmas tree. And know that you'll get to the other stuff. You already have the list in your head. You don't need to go through it again. And if you really are not good at keeping, a list in your head, then go write it down and then come back and be fully present in the moment with whatever you're doing. Um, Try to recharge your batteries with downtime or alone time. Extroverts really are energized by being around people. That's what it means to be an extrovert. But even they have their limits. Introverts are recharge their batteries by being alone. So social activities drain their batteries. According to Myers-Briggs, about 49.3% of people are extroverts. So slightly less people in the world are extroverts. 50.7% are introverts. So the majority of people, really only by a slight margin, but the majority of people are more introverted, which means you're not probably getting your batteries recharged through social activity. So go for a walk, get out of the house, find ways to just get some moments alone so that you can, regroup, and then, even better, go take a nap somewhere and recharge your batteries. It really is okay to say no if you're experiencing holiday overload. There can just be way too many things to go to, and you really get to determine which ones you go to and which ones you don't. If your family is fractured in some way, then give yourself permission to grieve those who aren't present, and then focus on the ones who are. But it's going to be hard to focus on the people that are present if you're being nagged by the thoughts of who isn't there. Not just because they're necessarily dead, but because they're cut off or they're not talking to you. Spend some time at least thinking about that and grieving that disappointment. And then that will help free you up to be more present for the people that are available to you. But don't just say to yourself, oh, it's no big deal. I'm not going to think about it. No, acknowledge to yourself that it's sad and you're disappointed. Um, if you can't talk to somebody who's important because they can't make it to where you're going to be, get on the phone and talk to them for 15 minutes or 20 minutes and tell them ahead of time, I've only got about 15 or 20 minutes, but you're so important to me. I really want to make sure we touch base. The reality is if that person's important to you, they'll get more attention in those 15 to 20 minutes than they probably would if they're part of a big gathering. So, make time for the people that are important to you, even if they can't be there. And if that's not an option, send them a card that says just 3 of the things I love about you, just to let them know they matter to you. If you feel like the holidays become just too commercialized or they've lost their meaning, then create a more meaningful tradition for yourself. For example, volunteer at a food bank or a soup kitchen. Last couple of years, my siblings and I and partners have worked with, I think it's the Cheer Center out of Georgetown, to deliver things to seniors who are more isolated, and they load us up with food and fruit and gifts for men, gifts for women to go deliver to those seniors, and it has been so incredibly rewarding and very meaningful. Of course, the first time we delivered something, we pulled up to some house that was fairly rural here in Sussex County, and there was a very large, I think, Trump sign, which didn't exactly make me feel welcome. But once we came through that door and we were talking to this elderly couple, it didn't matter. It really didn't matter. They were so pleased that somebody had thought about them and had no idea they had been on this list to receive food and gifts. And they were so grateful. And you know what? All those differences didn't matter in that moment. And it was a very meaningful experience for all of us. Because I think it was my sister and her partner and my partner. It was just really meaningful for us. So if it feels like it's lost its meaning, do some things like that. You can, for example, clean out your closets, give away clothes, coats, blankets that you're no longer using. You can donate to Toys for Tots. I have a stack of books I'll be putting in the Toys for Tots box, and they're mostly geared toward young girls. And there's stories about girls as heroes, not Prince Charmings as heroes. So it's not so much an agenda. I just want to embrace and encourage women, girls to be fully themselves. So I go around to Toys for Tots and drop off some books. I hope they make it to the people. Um, fill up this is an idea I saw and I thought it was very cute. Like for a month, just put extra change you have in a holiday jar or singles, and then pour that money into a gift bag and find somebody to give it to. There were stories about people just riding into town and finding somebody who looked down on their luck and handing them a bag full of all the change they had saved that month. Give donations as gifts. Those are just things to imbue the holidays with more meaning if you feel they've become too commercialized. So let's finally talk about some suggestions for coping with the holidays if you're grieving. First, acknowledge how you're feeling. It may feel agonizing to spend this joyous holiday without the person you love with you. Better to acknowledge that to yourself and hopefully your other family members than just to try to tough it out and pretend it's not happening. Because believe me, if you bury it, if you try to pretend it's not happening, it's just going to seep out in other ways. So better to address it head on. In fact, consider organizing a family meeting to discuss how you're going to handle the upcoming holidays. Talk about what are realistic expectations, and make sure people understand that you're not going to be your old self, and you may not have the energy to do things you've done in the past. And the family meetings can obviously be by phone or Zoom or if you don't live close by to your family. Consider creating a ritual to honor the person who will be missing rather than pretend oh, we don't want to talk about that. It might bring us all down. No, light a candle by a picture for that person and put next to that picture and that candle some of their favorite holiday treats. Make a space for them because instead, if they're there, you're acknowledging it and it's in many ways much less painful and you're much less alone with it than if you're just trying to pretend it didn't happen because everybody knows that you're grieving, and obviously if it's a family member, many people are grieving. So light a candle for that person. Some people leave an empty chair for the person. There's all different ways. This was an idea I got from my old boss, Vicky Costa. She said, sometimes if you've lost your partner, one thing you can do is you can carry something that connects you with them. So if you're a man, it might have been an earrings that your wife wore, or for women, it might be a piece of jewelry your husband wore, but something that is unique to that partner and keep it in your pocket or keep it close by. And you don't necessarily have to tell anybody because it's something that's sort of intimate and exclusive. So that's what a relationship between two people, that's, a marriage or a partnership is. There are parts of that relationship that are just between the two of you. So it's a way of having that moment that's just between the two of you. So you have that ring in your picture in your pocket, or you have maybe a handkerchief or something that you hold on to. And it's a symbolic act that reminds you that you still share only certain things with your loved one. And it helps you feel connected to that person, and it reminds you that you still have a bond with them that's always been only a bond that you had with them. So it's just a little way to make them present and still feel connected to them. You might have to identify roles that the person who has died played in the family events and decide who's going to take over that role. And it is maybe a passing on to the next generation. It's important, if possible, to involve the children and any teens in your family meetings about creating a meaningful ritual or how you want to spend the holiday. Don't exclude them. That's really important. They be a part of it. You can ask a person to list. I think in general, this is a good way to go into a family meeting. Ask everybody to list three things that are most important to them about the holidays. Like, what are the things they most look forward to during the holidays? Might be baking sugar cookies or decorating the tree, or, what are the things, three top things that, you really like to do for the holidays? And then again, at a meeting that can be by phone or email or Zoom, try to create a holiday that allows everybody to get some of what they really like. Because of course, there's a lot of overlap, but it's important to see if you can really try to include something that's important to every person in the family. Um, so you want to usually designate one person to kind of sort that out. It certainly shouldn't be the person who's most currently grieving, but it's a good way to plan ahead and make sure that you're doing stuff that's meaningful to everybody who's a part of the family. And if you don't have a family that would do this with you and plan because it's too touchy feely or something, I don't know, make a plan for yourself because you have control over that. So think about what might be most difficult for you and come up with some ideas about how you'll address that particular challenge. If being around people and making chit chat is exhausting or difficult, limit the amount of social events you go to. Go late, leave early, and just limit the number of events you have to go to. Lisa Williams, writing for a webpage called What's Your Grief, wrote, let your perfectionism go. If you always have the perfect tree, perfectly wrapped gifts, and perfect table, accept that this year may not be perfect and that it is okay. I know this is easier said than done for you type A types, but give it a try. That was her recommendation that I mentioned early on. This is a time that can invoke that feeling that you should be perfect, let it go. Also, think about how other people can help you and ask them for that help. People generally want to help, but they don't know how to help. They don't always know what to do. And they'll say things like, well, just let me know if there's anything I can do. So give them some ideas. And sometimes it could just be you want them to listen. You want to be able to tell somebody about the memories you have of Christmas with your loved one. They don't have to find these magic words that make it all better. There are no magic words that make it all better. But when they listen, you're less alone. And that's what makes a difference. So if you need people that can talk to you, make a specific request like that. If you really need help wrapping the presents, ask somebody to help you wrap presents. You don't like to go shopping because the stores just, see a million things you think you would have bought your loved one. Get somebody to go shopping with you. We always do better when we let people help us. We always do. This is a time when it's really important to ask for help. A few more things. Think about what's helped you cope in the past when you've had difficult challenges. Think about what nurtures you, what's good for you, and trust your instincts because you have been through challenges before and you do have some of that information inside you. Again, give yourself permission to take it very easy this year and focus on what you want to do. Give yourself permission to say no and to set limits. Probably best not to totally isolate yourself. So don't completely lock yourself away, but think of a few social events that feel meaningful or manageable for you. It could just be going to the movie with just one friend because that's really all you can handle. And a movie's easy because you don't have to talk a lot. You can just do an activity together, or it might be just stopping in for dessert at a party that you've been invited to. So find something you can say yes to, but so you don't totally isolate yourself, but don't feel like you have to do as much as you've done in the past. Be around people who understand that you're grieving, or educate your people. And like I said, the best thing you can tell people to educate them is that they don't have to come up with any magic words. You just want them to listen, and that's the greatest gift because you're less alone. Um, Give yourself a present, if only the present of putting your needs first this year. Give yourself the gift of time to do what you want to do that restores you. If you're having trouble parting with your loved one's clothing, this could be a time to donate some of them to a homeless shelter. This is a good time for letting some of that go and thinking about how it will be passed on to people who can use it now. And again, if you're not ready to do that, you're not ready. Then you can let go of some of it and not have to let go of all of it. Maybe pick out a few special items that belong to your loved one and give them as gifts to family and friends who you think would appreciate them. That's another way to do something meaningful this holiday. Cut down on the shopping, go through catalogs or purchase gift certificates or an inspirational book, or give everyone a book that your loved one loved. If there was a favorite movie they liked or book that they liked, that can be your gift to everybody this year. Make shopping as easy as possible. And if you want to skip it altogether, do that. Give yourself permission to feel whatever you're feeling. Cry when you need to cry. Tears are natural pain relievers. There's a reason we cry. There's a reason why we say, have a good cry, because you generally do feel better afterwards. So let yourself cry when you need to. And if you're angry and again, it may not be rational, it doesn't have to be. You have to be rational about how you express it so you don't get arrested, but you can find safe ways to express even anger. But there's much more harm done by repressed feelings than safely released feelings. Be happy when you can be, and don't be surprised if you do have moments of happiness. And know that your loved one would want that for you. It's normal to have periods of joy, even during periods of grief and loss, and it's not a betrayal of your loved one. Give yourself permission to think whatever you're thinking. If you're experiencing a spiritual crisis, if you're feeling angry or abandoned by God, allow yourself to know that for right now, that's where you're at. It probably won't stay that way forever, but it's true for you right now. And rather than judge it, just allow yourself to know that that's where you're at now. Because if that is something that's really going on for you, the only way you'll resolve that is if you find a way back to forming an authentic relationship with the divine, however you define that, if that is an important aspect of your life, that you'll have to find a genuine way back that incorporates this experience that you've gone through, and it can take time to figure out how that happens. And if you want it to be genuine, you give yourself that time. You don't try to leapfrog over the doubts or the questions or the difficult feelings. You give yourself time to process them and then form a different kind of perspective on those things. If you have doubts or questions or outraged at life's kind of injustices, which is often how you feel after a tragic loss, they probably won't last forever. But for now, it's real and it's really normal, and be okay with that. Finally, know that the anticipation of the holidays is likely to be worse than the actual holiday. So, just this period when we're thinking about it ahead of time could be some of the most difficult. And let me finish with just a few ideas about rituals you can do to honor your loved one. One thing that I think is a really good way is to ask everybody ahead of time to think of some way in which that person still lives on in them. Maybe they taught you how to play and be in the moment. Maybe they just have a special place in your heart that they will always occupy. Maybe they left you with some wonderful memories, or they passed on their love of books or music or animals, and they placed a feeling of deep love inside you. So we ask everybody to think of some way in which that loved one still lives on in them, and to bring that idea to the holiday party. And you can pass out index cards, and people can write those down, and then you can go around the room and have everybody share what they wrote, and then put them in a basket and maybe put them into a memory book for the person who's grieving the most, or to be shared by the whole family. Just a nice way to remember that your loved one still lives on. People can bring stuff to add to a memory book. It can be pictures, a letter to the person who died, the three things you loved about the person, special memory, pictures that were drawn by the children. And again, go around and have people share those. That's another thing you can do. And you can also have people from afar mail things in to be added and shared, and then later put into a book. Start a new tradition, perhaps share stories with the children who may not have known their grandfather as well. And over the years, sharing stories about him will keep him alive, for those grandchildren. Um, Make a donation in your loved one's honor to a charity, or buy a gift in memory of your loved one and donate it to a charity. One idea I saw was buy something you would have purchased for your loved one and donate it to a charity. This can be really good for children, and Toys for Tots is a good way to go. Think of them to invite them to think about what toy to pick and then have them involved in dropping it off and putting it in the Toys for Tot box. You can decorate a candle or an ornament in memory of your loved one. You can buy an angel that represents your loved one. You can find these angels, all kinds of angels in stores everywhere, and you can use that angel as your holiday present, or you can just buy it for yourself and have it as a memory of your loved one. Again, do things like consider giving a loved one's favorite book to everybody, cook a favorite holiday treat or dessert that that person loved, and think about beginning your meal with a moment of silence, a special prayer, or even a toast to the person who has died. Again, don't pretend their absence isn't there. Better to acknowledge it so that it's not hanging over everybody the whole day. Better to acknowledge it, and if people have to cry, they cry. There is no harm in that, but acknowledge it. Um, Again, I'm going to stop, but on the last page, you're going to find questions that can help you plan ahead. What do you think will be most difficult for you? What can you do to make it easier? What have been your favorite parts of the holidays? And you make sure you do some of the things you enjoy. And then finally, how would you like to remember a loved one? I'll end with a quote. My to-do list for today: count my blessings, practice kindness, let go of what I can't control, listen to my heart, be productive but calm, just breathe. So just some final words of wisdom, not from me. So I'm going to open the floor and see if we have any questions. I better open up the thing that says
Yeah, if
this.
anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can feel free to unmute if you feel comfortable doing that.
Oh, I see a very sad
Here we
story.
go.
Hmm. I'm just reading this story. I don't know who posted this. A man who's 37, whose little brother was killed by his father on Christmas Day. Wow, what a terrible memory. He was 7. His father and mother were charged with the murder, and both sent to prison. His father was killed by inmates while in prison. His mother is still there. Needless to say, the gentleman told me that he hates Christmas and he never enjoyed it. He is also a veteran who has experienced a lot of death, and he struggles with alcohol. Is there anything that I can say to him that might be helpful? I would start by acknowledging that, it'd be pretty hard for anybody who had those associations with the holidays to find the holidays pleasant. I mean, I think probably he talks to people that are like, oh, come on, Christmas is a good time, or Hanukkah is a good, he probably gets a lot of people that dismiss it. I think it'd be really important to validate that he may never be able to enjoy the holidays because of the incredible pain that's um, associated with the holidays. But I would also explore whether he'd be interested in doing something in memory of his brother who was killed. Is there, donate to Toys for Tots. Imagine the presents he would have given his little brother if he, was still his little brother today. So maybe instead of avoiding the thing that's most painful, it'd be to think if there's something meaningful he can do related to that tragedy, and make it a part of the holidays. But I think it's also important to say to him, of course you can't enjoy the holidays. I don't think anybody has an association with the holidays that's probably much more horrendous than that. So, let him be okay with where he's at, because I can understand. And I think probably most people would be uncomfortable with his feelings and want to just dismiss them. The alcohol, unfortunately, once somebody's learned how to use that as a coping mechanism, they need help to be able to deal with that. And I don't, it would really depend on how open he is and ready he is to face that. Um, but my experience is you can't get people to see the good if you can't hang out, if you can't take the elevator to hell with them, is what I say. If you can't go to places where people are really hurting inside, then you probably aren't going to be able to help them much, because they're down there every Christmas. He's down there he's taking the elevator to hell, and he's thinking about the horrible things that happened one Christmas that entirely changed his life. So just to be present for him and have him tell the story or talk about any feelings that linger, obviously, being present with him is probably the best thing you can do. And then maybe he will, reach a point where he can also find some positive. But I think first you have to go where he's at. So that would be my suggestion. I don't know if that's helpful. I see a hand up. Do you know how to unmute? Okay, Sarah, I'm leaving it on you.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, good, good.
Thank you,
Very-
Dr. Judy. My husband's on hospice care. He has a progressive neurodegenerative illness, and part of it, he just doesn't talk much anymore, just very, very quiet, because it's harder for him to articulate. But my mother, who I care for her, I'm her care partner, but she's in a memory care facility. She has dementia. And
Mm,
I really struggle with particularly with my mom, where the cognitive abilities are just getting less and less, and it's hard
mhm.
for her. She's doing the dementia talk, so It's hard to connect. We try to get some of my siblings on the phone, but she doesn't make a lot of sense when we're talking. Try to do Zooms and she just gets very confused by the faces
Yeah.
on the screen. You know,
Yeah.
I'm doing the best I can. Do you have any suggestions just for, we'll have her over at Christmas when my kids are
Sure.
here, but how to make it just, some specialness to
Yeah,
it?
well, I think first of all, let's acknowledge how hard this is on you because you have to bear witness to all this, and that's pretty painful. Music. I went to visit my aunt who had dementia, and we just started singing Christmas carols, and she started singing along with us, even though she really couldn't articulate much. And so it's worth a try to sing some Christmas carols because if you ever look at that documentary Alive Inside, people who seem like they cannot communicate at all, they're totally shut away, they put headphones on and they hear the music that they know and they start responding to it. So I just have that memory of going to see my aunt in the nursing home and we all just started singing Christmas carols. And none of us even remember all the words. We're humming along at different points, but she joined in with us, really joined in with us. And I remember when I had a good friend who was an elderly woman who was dying, and we started singing to her because we knew music could be still processed, and there were times when she joined in with us. So it's worth a try to consider using music, but
Yeah,
also to get
she always was very involved in music too. That's an
ah
excellent idea. I'll try. She's very discriminating though. Like when they have little music over at her facility, she goes, they just don't have very good singing voices. But hey, we'll do the best we can, and maybe we'll play some some YouTube videos where it's the professionals playing, and we can like just
there you go and mouth
not
along.
speak too
Yeah, yeah.
loudly.
Yeah. There's a great book. It's by Jolene Bracken, Bracken. And I think it's called Creating Moments of Joy. And it's all about how to create singular moments of joy with people who have dementia. Because they're like she talks about a man who, he loved to fish and they got him a fishing rod with no string or hook on it or anything. And they had him show his granddaughter how to do that. And he instinctively sort of knew how to do that. But she's got a web page. So look up Creating Moments of Joy. I'm pretty sure you'll find her web page, and it has all kinds of ideas of what some people with dementia will respond to. So it's worth a
I
shot.
I do really find myself, I think now especially that I'm just, that anticipatory grieving of,
Yes.
not having what we used to have. Both my loved people here are
Yes.
changing, and
Yes.
I have to obviously accept who they are in the moment they are. And, I do. But,
Yeah.
after I dropped my mom back off on Thanksgiving, I was driving home and I just had to say, I saw a gorgeous sunset. And,
Yeah.
it just kind of, just that moment about brought a tear to my eye, but I just had this little pity piece of, feeling sorry for mom and Jack and me. And
Yeah.
I moved past it, but,
Yeah, but you're not
I
done.
know what you're saying, and I was just with it. You have to be with the moments.
And don't call it being having a pity party. The reality is I just gave a whole talk on this very topic of grief and dementia. The biggest thing the caregivers and even the person with dementia experiences that's most difficult about that journey is grief. All the research shows that the hands-on care and the other stuff that you have to learn, that is not the most challenging part of being a caregiver. The most challenging part about it is all the grief. And you lose, it's called the long goodbye. It goes on forever and you lose them in bits and pieces. So to have your mom and your partner both going through that, believe me, my dear, you are grieving and you need to give yourself permission to grieve. And the holidays, again, will really bring that into sharp focus. But that is the biggest challenge caregivers and people when they're developing dementia, at least when they're still conscious of it. The biggest component research shows, and you send me your email, I'll send you the handout. It is the grief that is most difficult. It is an agonizing grief because they're here but gone. They're physically here, but they're not the same person. That just disappearance of the known self is just gut wrenching. Gut wrenching. I do a support group for caregivers of people with FTD, which is a particular kind of dementia. But I hear the stories all the time. It is, and I don't. It doesn't take much to imagine being in that position. So be kind to yourself too, and you are grieving. You are
Thank
grieving.
you, Dr. Judy.
You're welcome. Sarah, I haven't gone through all the things that people have posted. Do you see anything else I should respond to?
I don't see any other questions in the chat. I don't know if anyone sent you some directly, but if anyone wants to unmute, if you have any other questions for Dr. Judy, we'll give you a couple more minutes.
I see something, someone was asking about a different kind of grief when you're recently diagnosed with a very serious condition. I mean, that is a grief to lose your health, to not be able to take for granted that you can do the things you used to do in the past. That is a terrible grief, because A, it's happening to you, but it's also really true that it starts to restrict your life, and you're robbed of so many things you could do and take for granted in the past. And those are multiple losses, and that's just very difficult. Give yourself permission to feel all the things that you're feeling, and find people who you can talk to, or join a support group if there are other people that are dealing with a similar condition. If you can't find it in the hospital or the location where you're diagnosed, go online, because there's lots of online support groups. And when you have an unusual condition that not everybody knows about and deals with, sometimes an online support group is really a good way to go, because you're talking to people who really get what you're dealing with. So take that seriously. You matter, and you need to get support and help through this. It's very difficult to get a serious diagnosis, a medical condition. That's not something to ignore. Make time for yourself, and get the support and help you need, because that's challenging. And be very kind to yourself and patient. Any other questions? All right.
All right, well,
Well,
thank you. Go.
Yeah, I just want to say, I wish you the best out there during the holidays. Do the best you can. And you know what? Don't expect to do this perfectly either. You're going to try to make it easier on yourself. You're going to try to do different things that might work for you, but also don't expect to be able to do this perfectly. You're human. We all are. I am, you are, we all are. And it's okay. It's what makes us unique. And, I really wouldn't want to be a robot. I'm glad we're all human, but life is challenging. So be kind to yourself no matter what happens. Just be kind to yourself.
Holidays are challenging.
Yes, they are. That's for sure. There's no question about that. And yet you're seeing all these commercials, and it's the most wonderful time of the year. And so it can feel kind of crazy making when it doesn't feel like the most wonderful time of the year to you, So just knowing that you're not alone is really important.
I think that's the one part that helps. Sometimes
Yeah.
knowing
Yeah.
that we're not the only ones. At times you sometimes feel that you're the only ones. At times it's nice to know you're not. You're kind of
Absolutely.
going down that road that.
Yeah. If you looked around, you'd see there are many other people on the road, but since it's kind of something we usually experience pretty personally and not in a large group, you don't know that. But believe me, that's one thing about being a therapist. I mean, so many of the things that people come to me about that they feel ashamed of or they feel bad about, and they're so universal. They're things I relate to. They're things the next person who walks through the door tells me they're experiencing. That's the sad part. It's why I wish we talked more about what we struggle with internally, because I think we'd really find out we are not alone. And as a therapist who's heard many, many stories, let me tell you, a lot of the things we struggle with are universal. We all just want to be loved. We all worry that we're not lovable or good enough. I mean, there are just certain things that, and almost any emotion you're having, believe me, you are not alone. Other people are having those feelings too, but we hide it and we feel ashamed of it, and we think we're not supposed to acknowledge it. And it creates a prison that just shouldn't be there. You are not alone.
With the prison we created for ourselves sometimes.
Well, sometimes we do, but we had some help getting there. We're the only ones that probably can free ourselves, but you didn't end up in that place by yourself. Unfortunately, things happen to you when you're really young that do shape that. And they happened to you when you were a kid, and you made the best decisions and coping strategies you knew how. But you're right now, you're the one that can get yourself out of there, but you usually can't do it by yourself. Let somebody help you. I don't know why we think we should be able to overcome our biggest challenges all by ourselves. You were hurt in relationships, you get healed in relationship, which is what therapy is all about. Obviously, I'm a believer in that. So, don't face it alone. All right, Sarah, you close
Yep.
this out.
That was super powerful, Dr. Judy. Thank you so much. And I do hope,
All right.
we see you all next month. Thank you again.